Welcome to One by One podcast. It's going to be a really interesting podcast. I'm really excited about this. You have no idea. علاش I'm excited because it's a really interesting guest that we have today, completely different from the other guests اللي déjà كانوا في البودكاست. And so, should I give a quick introduction or you want to do it?
I can do a quick introduction.
Go for it.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here today.
Of course.
We've been friends for quite a while now, and I know I've promised you a podcast a few years ago.
A few years.
And it's time to do it now. So yeah, it's a pleasure. My name is Hamza. I'm a principal software engineer at Yahoo. I dabble on a few other side projects, but that's my main job. My greatest achievements, or why we're having the chat today, is because first, I'm one of the youngest principal engineers in the UK, if not the whole world. The average age of principal is 39 years old. I'm 24. And also, it's quite rare to hear stories like mine. And the goal for me today is just to show people it's possible. Even though it's difficult, it's still possible, and give people hope, especially in Morocco, and share knowledge and just, give back to the community, because I have a lot of people who've helped me, whether I know them or not, as an individual. They can be through books, through friends, through mentors, through random people on Reddit. And so I just want to contribute to that.
What a nice statement to start the podcast with. Yeah, so I know you're here to share your story, your journey. So I would love to start, logically from the beginning.
Sure.
هتكون good if you walk us from your background, where did you grow up, how did you start having the ideas that took you to the good path of self-growth and personal development and working on yourself, working on your career, especially coming from the environment that you grew up in. So take us there.
Sounds good. I'll start from my childhood. So since I was a kid, I was born in Meknes. I've lived there for 6 years before we moved to Taza. My parents are from different cities, from Morocco. And my dad was an aircraft engineer, technician, working for the military. And so since a young age, I've had the opportunity to talk to him, hear what he does, even though that was quite rare. But most importantly, he was there to explain certain topics, and the gifts and the toys he bought us, or specifically me when I was a kid, they were intriguing. For example, I had a PS2 when I was 4 years old, or 5
Let's
years
go.
old. Yeah, I know that sounds quite fancy, but for me at that age, what was very interesting was you have two pins that you plug into the wall, and then you get this game on the screen, and that was just insane. I wanted to understand how it works. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, I opened the PS2 in a quest to understand or to see what's inside, to get an idea of how it works. And to my surprise, nothing moves inside. It's just these tiny little block boxes on the motherboard. And so I asked my dad, what are those? And he's like, those are CPUs, transistors. That's what makes it tick. I tried reading the first how CPUs work, or made book when I was 11 years old. Obviously, that was very difficult, because it explained how you essentially combine the transistors to have logic using electricity. So addition, subtraction, all the basic arithmetic operations. The goal of this was I wanted to build my own games, my own software, and be able to essentially control the machine, which was a bottom-up approach. And this usually works in most domains, like medicine, construction, whatnot. You start with the little pieces, and then you build from there. But to my surprise, that is quite the opposite in software. You have to kind of like ignore the little pieces, like how the low-level stuff works. You start from the big picture, and then you get deeper, like as you progress into your career or your knowledge. When I was 14 or 15, I started dabbling with learning how to program, creating my own little websites, trying to understand how it works. But then I stopped for a few years. I tried a few other side projects. I was kind of like a hustler since a young age. I just wanted to make my own money, really. I had an expensive taste. I wanted expensive toys, and asking your parents for money all the time will not get you that far. So I just wanted my own money. I just wanted to, get that as quickly as possible. I've tried a few things, but then at one point I was like, I'm good with computers. Why don't I like give it a proper chance and try to make some money out of that? And so like a week after like finishing the high school exam back, I started fully investing myself into learning how to essentially do web development. And then 2 months later, I secured my first project. It was like for £200, 200 like USD. And it was to essentially design and create my first ever website for clients in South Africa, which I'm still very grateful for, because that essentially showed me it's possible. And I was happy and smiling for like 3 days straight when I got that first project. And so it was history from there. I just grew and grew and grew. I hope that answers your question.
Beautiful. What I'm interested in, and what was really captivating about the story that we've had a talk about, was the moment that you switched from the classic path, which is the class prépa, which is a really good path from Maghreb, that everyone is amplifying the class. Are you going to be able to do the class? Sciences Math is the main road that you can take, and if you excel, you're allowed to do the class from Maghreb, the class prépa. So consider the class prépa, right? That's what's really interesting here, when you switched and really decided to, and you said, I have something else that I really need to give a proper chance to, so I'm going to do this instead of what everyone is shedding the light on. So عاود لينا على ذاك المومنت ولا the whole period of time.
So yeah, I don't like thinking of it as a moment. It's more like a process. I believe there is always a process, even if you don't realize there is a process. There is always one. Like there's just a difference between a good process and a shitty process. And so for me, at that stage, I was in the process of growing in what I'm doing, which is software development. So I was, while studying in the class préparatoire, I was getting projects on the side, and I was month by month making a bit more money, and also getting the chance to work on more complicated and interesting projects for me. And so in the first year, by the end of it, I was making nearly like 10,000 Saraf dirham a month while studying one of the top of my class. And then by the second year, obviously we have a national like exam. And so I was at a point where either I have to stop what I'm doing on the side and focus on the studies 100%, or continue what I'm doing. And surprisingly enough, at that time, I had an opportunity to work with a company in the UK. It was called Idea Drop, and it was like either this or that. And that project, if I said yes, it would take me to another level. And so one day I was at the class, and I was just thinking like rationally, like all these kids, like myself included, were all studying to essentially like 4 years later or 5 years later get exactly the same chance that I have at the exact same moment. Like that includes the money and also the knowledge and the opportunity of growth. So for me, it was the call to simply
That was the moment.
For me, that was like, if I had to pinpoint a moment, that was the moment. And so I said, I have to give it a chance. Obviously, I've taken like other steps before like taking this. I wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna see what happens. So before that, I had a few savings saved up, some money saved up, and also I had an opportunity with another company here in Morocco. So essentially, I was working for two companies, but the opportunity in Morocco essentially gave me more comfort, given that it's you will be working with some people face to face. Although I only worked with that company for like 4 months before I quit um, in Rabat.
Interesting. It's a really interesting story. I mean, I've heard this before, but it's still interesting. So, one of the things that you had to do, especially at the beginning of your career, I believe, was to learn the skills and acquire those skills that you will be essentially working with, and either tech skills or also different type of skills. I mean, how to learn effectively and how to start learning a new skill was a topic that we always talked about. So can you take us, give us a little step-by-step guide of how you do it, and maybe and where did you get that from? All the books, the resources that you read in order to be able to really know how to learn a skill the way you do, especially that skills that require a lot of time, but you need to shortcut in order to use it and move on to.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I definitely give a lot of credit to The Power of Habit. I've read that book when I was like 14 or 15, and I've just essentially like took all the knowledge it has inside and tried to apply it to my life. And one of the main like points of that book is that habits shape pretty much like all our lives. So if you want to improve a company, yourself, your family, your behavior, I don't know, your lifestyle, anything, doing it by changing your habits will most likely work better than trying to force yourself through other methods. Surprisingly, a lot of people think high achievers use a lot of willpower, or they think a lot. It's quite the opposite. They pretty much all the time run on autopilot. Everything is figured out before like they even wake up in the morning. Like you can ask them like what they'll be doing like the next month, or like how will look like, and can give you an answer. And then a month later, they'll be exactly doing the same thing they told you. And so that was the very first step, like realization for me, is that I have to essentially double down on my habits. And so that was the first thing I wanted to change. The first step was to identify the good habits I want to build. And for me, the first habit was I wanted to spend like 2 hours every day, 5 days a week, learning like software development, and more specifically web development at that time. And so I've gotten a book, like a notebook, and then I essentially every day before I sleep, I track how many hours I've worked and if I did work or not. And like once you like have 10 days in or like 15 days in, it's very difficult to break the strike. It's like even if you're tired, like just the thought of like I'm gonna have a blank spot, it
Feels
gives
like a
you.
failure.
It's like essentially you're getting addicted to cigarettes, but in a positive way. It's like you gotten yourself addicted to that dopamine or like the rush of like when you get the good thing done at the end of the day. And it works. A lot of people think that change or like learning can happen like very quickly, or should happen very quickly, which you see a lot in our like education. Like a lot of students, like they would spend like nights, day in, day out, just studying, or like trying to brute force everything in the shortest amount of time. But it doesn't work that way. You have to give your brain freedom and time to like recover and just change like the neural pathways to essentially like get the stuff you learned like engraved. And just 2 hours of studying and then having a good night's sleep, and you compound this like day in and day out for a year, by the end of that year you learn a lot, and what you learn like sticks in your brain. And so I knew this, and so I just wasn't forcing myself. Like 2 days in, I'm happy with like 2 hours every day. I'm super happy with it. I did that for just 2 months, and I was able to secure my first project. And then like a year later, I was to secure a full contract with the British company. Then after that, I was working with way more companies, more complicated projects. And then one other thing, like I realized, and also like read in multiple books, including The Power of Habit, is focus on learning one thing only. Like, do not overstretch yourself. If you're learning software development, focus on one language, one topic, give it time. You're most likely gonna get way more results putting all your energy on one thing. But then some people will say, well, I don't know what the exact thing to spend my energy on. And if you're just starting your career, that's completely fine and it's completely normal, and it should not stop you from making progress. My advice, even I still face that today, because there is so much to learn and so much to do. And so being able to essentially take a decision on what to essentially spend your energy and time on is as important as spending the energy and time. And for me, that's a mixture of, for now, it's a mixture of a gut feel, because we all know what we like and we don't like. You cannot force yourself to spend time and energy consistently day in, day out if you do it on something you don't like. And that's normal. Like, that's good. If you find something you don't like, that's actually, a win. And then also being able to identify what you don't know, and trying things as quickly as possible. So when you're just starting your career, like for example, software development is it's like medicine. It's like there is so many topics. What you can easily do is like spend 1 week on different things like mobile development, web development, different branches of web development. You can go into backend development or like system engineering, DevOps, AI. And there are courses available online for all of these topics, and then you can get a feel of what you like, or even like a different domain. Like you'll get a feel, and once you get that feel, like double down on that, and spend time and use courses from like acclaimed mentors, because they will help you to know the shortcuts and also not waste time on things that doesn't matter.
I got some really powerful moments out there, especially the part where you were talking about getting addicted to that specific good moment.
Yeah.
And my next question would be, we all can read books, right? Books are accessible to all of us. It all comes down to what are you going to do with the knowledge that you read and those lines and words that you read in that book. So my question for you, how did you gain that awareness of knowing that if you apply certain things that you read in books and actually be consistent, that you will start seeing some improvement in your physical reality?
Yeah, that's a very good...
Especially at such a young age.
Yeah, that's a very good point. This will come from my family. I don't come from a very wealthy or like educated family. It's quite the opposite. There are a lot of bad examples in my family. And so while growing up, like you would hear like people say like don't smoke, or like don't get into drugs, or like don't gamble because it will lead to X, Y, and Z. For me as a kid, I can see the person like doing that, and he's like the result, what it was, which is, it's sad, but it is what it is. So that was the very first realization for me, is like, usually people are right if like they tell you like if you do certain things, like you will get certain results. Like just here in Morocco, like I remember as a kid, I would get like in taxi cab, and they would be talking to my parents, be like, I regret not like studying, not going to school, and it's too late for him, unfortunately, like because he's like 50 or 40, so he regrets it, and his life could have been way different. And so for me, I just trusted those random people, like, and also in books, like you can essentially learn a lot of lessons, life stories from people like that you never saw, like they might have been dead like decades ago, but like what they've done through their life, whether their mindset, their mental models essentially how they see life, their decisions, their habits, and how their life turned out to be. And the power of habits, again, it illustrates a lot of these examples, like from alcoholics, like changing their lives when they pick new habits and are able to quit alcohol, to people from homeless to millionaires, and then the opposite as well, from millionaire to homeless, from a successful person to an alcoholic. And looking at what they do, like life is simple, like looking at what they've done and do, like you can easily start predicting, like it's basically probability. Like if you essentially spend all your money gambling on alcohol, on drugs, chances are within 10 years you're gonna blow through it all. Your career will go nowhere. And I can't exactly remember the book, but an example I like to give about this up is if you have two twins, both the same age, they work the same job, and they live in the same house. The first twin comes home, he turns on the TV, gets a few drinks, watches the TV, the latest show. Weekend he goes out, he get wild nights, all that. He wastes his money on like designer clothes, travel, whatnot. And then the second twin, he spends his money on courses, on projects. He goes to seminars, webinars. He goes to the gym. He doesn't waste his weekends. He goes on a run. He tries to do good things for himself. He doubles down on his career. If I ask you 5 years later, who's going to be lucky?
The one who gambles.
Yeah.
It's pretty much logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you gotta trust the stories of other people, because you can learn a lot. Like you can essentially shrink a whole person into like few sentences.
That's really powerful. What I wanted to, are you the only Moroccan working at Yahoo?
Currently, I think yes, I'm the only Moroccan working at Yahoo.
The only Moroccan working at Yahoo in general, or just
in general?
In your position?
I think in general.
In general?
Yeah.
Can you tell us the story of how did you start working at Yahoo? And Yahoo is, and maybe walk us a little bit by talking about where is Yahoo now, because maybe it's been a while that we didn't see Yahoo popping up in the search bar.
Yeah, definitely. So Yahoo is no longer like the go-to company or like a solution for searching. It's obviously Google, but they are still a very big company. They're still like the 5th largest in terms of like traffic worldwide. They have a lot of other companies. Some of them are like top of their domain, like Yahoo News and Yahoo Finance. They're profitable. They still make a lot of money off of that. Currently, Yahoo is owned by Apollo Holdings, so it's no longer a public company. It's a private company. You cannot buy shares in the stock market. And long story short, it has grown where it's successful, and it no longer spends or wastes energy on projects or domains where other companies are doing a way better job. And how I got my job at Yahoo, it's a bit of a long story, but essentially I invested a lot of energy into learning like enterprise front-end development, which basically means how you can build front-end applications that are enterprise friendly. Because in an enterprise application, something like, for example, like Facebook, it's very, very complicated. You have hundreds of like engineers working on the same app. You have a lot of risk, a lot of features, a lot of nuances, a lot of complexity. And unfortunately, a few years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge. And even like examples you can look at to understand how to do it And for me, that was a problem. I like solving problems. I like understanding how things work. So I invested a lot of energy into understanding how to essentially build and scale enterprise applications. And to my surprise, yeah, one of the Yahoo recruiters reached out to me and they were like, your profile is exactly what we're looking for, because they needed someone to guide like the design system team and other teams into their transition to TypeScript and the enterprise front-end development. And I was here in Morocco, and like the team was in like worldwide, and I was like, and that was very surprising to me. Like, how can I be here? Like, and they need like my expertise, and so that was the first step in. They loved the work I've done. They were very, very surprised. And then a year later, I went out to my director, like a few things happened in the company, some people left. And I went to him and was like, I want more responsibility. And he agreed. The problem was I could not stay in Morocco. It was too much risk for the company for me to be here and give me way more responsibility and direction over like certain projects. And so I had to relocate to the UK, which is where I live now, to work as the principal, leading a design system and the migration of few enterprise apps. The main one I was working at was called the SSP, which is very similar to like Google Ads, but the Yahoo version. But now I'm working on completely different projects, which I can get into.
So Yahoo was acquired, uh, you said by Apollo,
Yeah,
right?
so it was bought a few years ago, I think 2014 by Verizon. And then Verizon is like Maroc Telecom of the US, then sold it to Apollo Holding 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, so I believe you worked, you have experience working at startups,
Yes.
and I think you've already run your own startup before.
Yeah, I've worked mostly with startups actually. So Yahoo was the first like corporate, but my team is very like startup-ish oriented. Like has startup vibes. And yes, I did used to have my own software development agency in Morocco, which was called Code Studio, but I don't have it anymore.
So what would your advice be for someone who just started a startup, or someone who's interested in knowing how startups are being run?
Well, for me, like I mostly have experience with tech startups, so I do not have enough knowledge about different domains like medical or architecture. Like that's completely foreign to me. But for software in general, um, it depends. It's never like a simple answer. But if I would position, like if we take a situation, somebody in Morocco wants to do a startup, it totally depends on their target demographic, totally depends on what they're trying to solve, their skill level. Do they need funding? Like, for example, trying to create a food delivery app is somewhat simple. Like, you might need a bit more investing on other side of things, but can be an easy thing to do. But like rewriting the airline software or like the booking system, that's completely different, and you need to like raise funding, whatnot. And raising funding in Morocco, even in Europe, is very, very, very difficult. The US is mostly where like these type of projects can actually become a reality. Honestly, like if starting a startup, I do not recommend anybody to have that as a priority, especially if they're just starting their career. I know there are a few case studies, like stories where people like hit the jackpot, but statistically, most people like never hit the jackpot. And so they have more chance to succeed if they double down on their knowledge and their ability to solve problems. Like the more complicated problems you can solve, the higher compensation is going to be. Um, that would be my advice, like double down on knowledge and problem solving. If they solve, like even startups, like at the end of the day, you're solving an issue or like a problem somebody else didn't solve, or like you're essentially solving it in a better way or like a more efficient way.
I mean, working at a startup environment, I believe you, as you've told me before, that you were in contact with something called burnout in
Yes.
your life. I think
Yeah.
it's something that's pretty common in your domain and in many other domains. I mean, obviously, when you overwork yourself, uh, but I know that you have more awareness on how to avoid that situation of your body just shutting down and completely uh, uh, not reacting to what what you say or what you want to do. So can you what are the tricks to stay in contact with the burnout and not just handshake?
Sure, yeah. So how to mitigate burnout? It seems simple on the surface, but it's like chicken and an egg type of situation. Like you want to achieve a lot in the least amount of time, but then your body and brain is only capable of um, giving so much before like it runs out of fuel and it's completely drained. Um, for me personally, I know that. So let me give you an example. Like when I had my first burnouts, that was a few years ago. I used to work day in and day out, including weekends. I used to have multiple projects, learning multiple things at the same time, like not taking any time off. Obviously, I was learning a lot. I was progressing, extremely fast speeds, but then it hits out of nowhere. It's like you can start feeling yourself getting tired. Like you sleep, you have a good night's sleep, but then you wake up feeling still tired. You get the coffee, still tired. This is like the initial signs, and then like you continue pushing yourself through this, and then at one point like you cannot even get to the keyboard. It's like you wake up and like just pushing yourself to get up like requires so much willpower, and then you get to the keyboard and your brain is not thinking. Like you would read something, it's just reading, like nothing goes through your brain, like nothing, like it's just blank. Then you push yourself through this, and then it's like a switch goes off for weeks. Like you just wake up feeling extremely tired, like you sleep all day, you feel sick, you might even feel physical pain, which actually did happen to me in another like few years later. That was last year actually. Like actual physical pain trying to do anything, which is insane. Like physiologically, like there is nothing wrong with your body, but it's all mental. And for me now, I take weekends off. That's a must. I never work on any projects. I don't learn on weekends, not even reading books. But because 5 days a week, like pretty much like when I'm not like traveling like in Morocco, like my day is planned from like to the morning till night. And so I learn, I work on my job, my side projects, I go to the gym, I try to eat healthy.
Try to optimize.
Yeah, but then optimizing for a long time, like even in that case, like you will hit the wall. Uh, and so you just have to take time off. You have to listen to your body. There is a good book I like, which is called the Psychology of Cycling. And like you might think that cyclists, like it's an extreme sport, like that they essentially go against their body when they're racing. Like when they feel pain, they try to push they don't. Actually, when they feel the pain, like they look at what action they can take. It's like, do they go gear lower? Do they slow a bit down? Do they have to drink some water? Do they need to eat some food? Or like, did, did they not get enough sleep the other night? Is it an issue with the bike? So it's the same with like engineering in your domain. Like you gotta listen to the pain. Like you're not sleeping well, or like you're getting tired. You gotta look at what you can change. For me, sometimes like I'm working a job, I'm learning a lot, extremely complicated topics. The change might be just I take the evening off, like I just go out for like a week. That week no learning, just my job. And then the next week I'm feeling refreshed. And so you just gotta alternate and listen to your body, and don't push. Like you gotta push, but like there is a balance to strike, and essentially you gotta try. Like if for me, I know this, but we're different. Some people's tolerance is higher. I consider myself, I have a high tolerance for like uh, it's called misery, but a lot of people don't. And so you just gotta A and B and test your body and track it down. Like for me, I do track that stuff down, like when I hit the burnout or like what's causing that or the type of food I have. Sometimes I didn't get my vitamins, obviously because the UK is there's no sun, so in the first few months that was an issue.
One of the things that we talked about was the systems. You keep saying you need to have a system for you to achieve something, because we know that your productivity or your life basically is not going to be as good as your goals, but it's going to be it's going to fall to the systems that you have and not your goals. I mean, a lot of people can have really, really high goals and not be on the way to achieve those goals if they don't have a system. I think that's a key word that you keep repeating when we're talking off camera about anything productivity related or just achieving things. So I would love to get your insight on what a system really is and how to actually have a system that will take you to where you want to go.
Sure. So a system, you can think of it as a collection of habits and rules, the do's and don'ts during the day. You said goals, but I like to think for having a goal independently is not enough. I prefer more to think of systems like getting to a point like losing weight. Like you need to go to the gym, you need to fix your diet. And so that's the system on a high level. And then you get deeper, like you need to eat certain type of food, you need to do certain type of exercises, and to get certain amounts of sleep. And we'll look at software. That's the exact same thing. So if you want to learn, for example, how to build enterprise applications, that might start like learning how about software architecture. That might progress into like learning how to build tooling, how to do like CI and CD deployment. And then you break these bits down, and then how to learn. Like obviously you have a full day. So when are you going to learn? So you have to make some time for learning. For example, like an hour a day from like 7 to 8 p.m. And so you do that for a couple of weeks. Personally, I like to work in quarters when I'm learning something or trying to hit something. So I have big goals. For example, like achieve something like in a year's time. Like for example, last year was to learn Rust, like become a proper like experienced Rust engineer. And how to do that was to essentially like spend an hour or 2 hours nearly every day learning a certain topic about Rust. Like from the first quarter was just learning the basics. The second quarter was like getting to an intermediate level. The third quarter was going into like open source projects and contributing. And then the fourth quarter was trying to essentially get my hands on a proper like production project that I can contribute to. And I did achieve all of this because, you know, I got a big goal, broken it up into smaller goals, and from that, like get even like into lower, like having a system where, you know, I'm gonna say also no, so like learning something else, because like something like it's a bit funny, but like the missiles, like they know where they are by knowing where they aren't, you know, which is, you know, very interesting.
That's really interesting. I mean, knowing what you don't want is a
What you don't want and what you don't want to learn, and also what you don't know. That's what gives you like where you are, because the field is so massive, and then you work your way from there. I know that's a bit like super high level, but I hope that.
I mean, yeah, but it sounds counterintuitive to that when you will know what you don't want, that's where you start knowing where you're going, and a big part of progressing in life is saying no to.
It's mostly saying no,
Mostly
actually.
saying no to.
Yeah, which is very surprising. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people think they can achieve more by doing multiple things at the same time, but it's actually opposite. Like you achieve more by just doubling down on one thing. Like most millionaires, most high achievers, like they all, like later on, like they start branching or like, you know, doing side investments or whatnot. But like even Google, like I say Google as an example, like most of their money comes from ads on the search. Like they have multiple projects still, like most of them are not even profitable. The search is what makes their money. Ads still is the thing that makes money for Facebook and Instagram. As that applies to companies, it also applies to individuals. when you find someone who's like extremely talented, like it's usually like he does one thing and one thing only. Like he plays football, and, or like he does engineering and like in just one specific topic, and he gets deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Yeah.
That's a really interesting. I mean, I knew this was going to be an interesting episode. So, to bring things back to the context that we live in, which is Morocco, I would love to know, I mean, can you give some advice? Because what's really interesting here, and that we didn't mention yet, is that you are 23 years of age. And that's what's really impressive. And even if you're younger than me, as I told you, I always switch to that learning mode when I'm with you, which says a lot about how dedicated you are to learning things and just progressing in life in general. So, what advice would you give to young people, especially Moroccans, coming from this context, and you grew up in Morocco? So, what would you say to let's phrase it like this? What would you say to a younger version of yourself?
Give value. Like learn how to give value. Like that's what usually makes you successful in any field. Learning how to give value requires learning how to learn, whether about yourself or about new topics, and learning what not to learn, which is also very, very important, because you don't want to waste time on things that will not like contribute positively to your success or what you're interested in. And so for people in Morocco, like, it's unfortunate, but the education system mostly doubles down on memorizing stuff and following orders. But leaders and people who are like leading large scale projects and working on extremely complex projects and have a lot of knowledge, at one point, like even I now, like I've reached a point where the topics that I want to learn about or like I'm working at, there is nothing like that can be like found on Google, or like the amount of case studies is extremely limited, if not existent. And so when you're like in these type of situations, like this is my situation, like it might be like super advanced, but it's everyone's situation. Like even if you're starting, like for you, like doing something might be super simple, for me is like impossible for someone who's really starting. So they have to know how to approach that situation and essentially how to learn. Like the goal is to do, for example, X, so how they can backtrack back to the beginning and know where to head
The
from there.
steps.
Yeah, and also like just, calming down and trusting the process, and like knowing that knowledge always wins. Like one trend I don't like in Morocco is that all these influencers trying to convince these young kids that starting a Shopify business, drop shipping, or like quitting school, or like they have to make money by any measure, and like having a business is all that matters. But most millionaires are not business owners, they're full-time employees, which is surprising. Like they're full-time employees, most millionaires worldwide. They don't even own the companies they work at. Most CEOs, they're multi-millionaires. They don't even own the company they work for. But why they are millionaires? Because they are able to solve certain problems that very few people can actually even comprehend. And then their ability to work with other people, because that's very important as well. Like unfortunately, us Moroccans, we don't have the best communication skills, and that usually backfires when we work like in the company, or like we try to work with other people. And so knowing how to work with people is also extremely important, plus the knowledge about the certain topic. So obviously to essentially summarize all of this, my advice would be, do not waste your studies. Like learn, even though like it might seem like a bit wasteful, like the type of schooling we have, or like not the most efficient, but it's still better than nothing, or like completely exiting the system. And then while still going this road, like they can look into the other like step forward, which is doing side projects on their own, like spending time learning about topics that they're interested at. And then potentially that can work for them. And then, once people start doing this, like it comes back to having like an external lens looking at you. It's like, think of it like me and you're sitting here, but I have a camera that I can look at, that's looking at me or like you, and then be able to judge, this is good, this is bad, this is what I need to improve. And then just repeat, rinse and repeat. And then time does its own thing, like it's just compounds.
You heard it here. uh, you started getting or researching about the topic of how CEOs think and how people who are at the top of their companies and who have to run like a company at such a big scale. So since you are studying how they think and you started getting into that, do you have a vision behind that? Would you want to own or have your own startup or business someday and run it
That's
at
a good,
such a high level?
yeah, that is your first instinct, is that I want to have my own business, but I had my own business, and for at least the next decade, I don't want to have my own business again. The reason I'm investigating into that is because that's an area,
Of interest.
no, it's an area where I don't have enough skills. That's an area where I lack enough knowledge and skill. That's the main like drive for me. Just want to learn it, essentially. That's the first goal, is, just curiosity and improving my communication and leadership skill. And obviously, I was fortunate to be in conversations, be in meetings with VPs, GMs, CEOs, and I've seen how they talk, like first how they talk, like the way they express their ideas and are able to hold conversations, and look at things on the fly, is very like peculiar and interesting. Like an individual contributor, like most of the time, is not able to do that. And that's the very first thing that strikes me, is like when you're talking to them, like just how they can explain like certain like very complicated topics in simple words to anybody, and also like being able to entertain and follow like different projects and things that are happening in the company, and use all that information and make a decision off of that, which is very difficult. Like on the surface, it seems like simple, like just listen, make a decision, but like a lot of that just happens on the fly. Like it happens on a meeting. Like by the end of the meeting, the result should be a decision. I just want to learn how they do that, like how they essentially are able to make that happen, and also like improve my communication and leadership skill, so like you can make more impact in a positive and a scalable way. Because unfortunately, like here in Morocco, like a lot of my friends, they work with companies, they have directors, VPs, but the way they make impact is toxic. It's like they're giving orders in the military, and that's will not get you far. Like you will not foster individual creativity and contribution if you just give orders in like in the military. You don't want that. So you want to like steer the ship, but not like exactly tell them how to steer the ship, like individual like moving pieces. So that is my main like drive. Why?
And in your work environment, you're in contact with a lot of people who have who worked at a tech company, and that's their background. Like you said, you work with people who worked at Apple or Facebook. I believe your work environment must be really, really different from the work environment that we're familiar with in Morocco. Can you tell us what was when you started working there? What struck you and what was impactful and really caught your attention, maybe, or inspired you in a way when you started working there?
Yeah, so my current team, the first thing that caught my attention is how much. So for context, my team is extremely senior. Like it's very, very senior people. Like they've worked on like leading projects all their lives. They're very knowledgeable, like top of their domain, which I'm very grateful for like being part of this team. And the first thing that I noticed working with them is how much autonomy they give everyone. Like everyone, like when you're given a project usually equals a problem. You're given total autonomy over that, no matter like your seniority level. So if your job is to solve a problem, like they trust you with that. So that's the first thing, like they actually trust you to solve it. And once that trust is there, like you feel like you're safe to make mistakes. And so you can try things and you can be very open, to give them feedback and also receive feedback. And then feedback, like the way they give feedback, feedback is a sensitive topic because a lot of people take feedback as criticism or like, like you essentially negatively judging their work, but it shouldn't be looked at that way. And this is another thing I notice about my team is like, no matter the feedback you give, it's always taken in positivity. And the way they give feedback is always like in a very smooth, and like enriching way. So it makes you feel good about the work you do. So it's not like shutting you down or like making you feel bad about yourself or like you've wasted time or any of that. And then also like they're team players. So we made mistakes. Obviously, the type of project we're working on has never been done before in any company, let alone Yahoo. So it's a green field. So there is a lot of trial and error. And sometimes we don't know, like if that, like we can make assumptions about a certain solution, or like we know that we're cutting corners, but we don't have an exact idea on like the type of impacts it might have. And so we're like very comfortable like making the mistakes and being able to iterate and not like, and even like sometimes like talking about mistakes or making decisions, like because this is a green field and there isn't a whole lot of case studies, like sometimes we have polarizing point of views. Like sometimes it can be not fully opposite, but very near like different like sides. But a lot of them like they simply like put down like their opinion and they double down on like the other person's opinion. They try it out and then they iterate. So instead of, it's always like making a decision moving forward instead of just stopping and trying to, predict what will happen.
That's really interesting. One of the things that I recently learned, especially when you're trying new ideas, when you're entering that realm of creating something that's really new, that's only in your team's minds, and you're just discussing it. Now you're in that trial mode. It's a very sensitive period where the collaboration, where a real collaboration needs to be installed, and the collaboration doesn't have any ego or personal opinion. You put that aside, and you come with that mindset of asking questions and yes, we've done this, okay, but how can we change it? Okay, you come with the progress. I respect the progress that you've done. This is really good because it is progress, because we're going somewhere, and it's really appreciated that you've done this. Then this is how we can evolve together as a team. I mean, it's really eye-opening to be able to work in a work environment like that, instead of just a different type of work environment where it's less appreciated. To think outside the box and just ask questions is considered as a weakness sometimes, but it's if you don't ask a question, usually the answer is no. And so I would love to just put a situation out there in order to challenge you a little bit, or challenge both of us. So let's say I'm a young Moroccan, right? And I have a lot of hopes and dreams, and life is just about to start, and I'm still young, maybe 16, maybe just a little bit older. There's a lot of resistance in my environment. there's a lot of things that constantly remind me that, just resistance in society and the people that you meet, and just people maybe crushing your ideas, not enough inspiration in your environment, a lot of, no one is pushing you. You have to really just dig inside for you to be able to see any type of light and any type of bright future. That's the picture that I'm painting. So how would you how would you react if you or how would you talk to that person that I just made up, which is a really common example?
Yeah, so yeah, unfortunately, this is very common, and it somewhat resembles my situation as well when I was at that age. The first advice is do not seek approval from the people around you at all. If you have an idea in your mind, you want to try it in secrecy. Only make it public once you hit that goal. Why? Some people will say, like black eye, or like all the, the eunuch, like we say in Moroccan, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is because when in your what your situation is exactly this, you barely convinced yourself that doing something is gonna work. Like, you don't know, so you probably didn't even convince yourself. So you're like still in that very fragile state where you're in doubt, you want to try, you're excited, you have a lot of fear. And so the moment you tell it to your friend, his first response is like, that will not work. And so you just shot everything that you probably have been thinking about for like weeks. So you haven't even started working, and he already like killed it, the idea in your brain. He probably didn't do this because of, envy or like hatred. But unfortunately, this is the normal response. Like, it's the easiest response for his brain is to assume that if he has never seen a live example, chances are it wouldn't work. And so that's my first advice. Like, do not seek approval. Do not like share these type of ideas. If you want to learn something, like if you like want to start learning architecture like at 16, do it in secrecy. Like, there are so many courses and like tutorials online, and chances are your parents or like your own group of friends or like your environment will add nothing to this. But if you're lucky enough to have someone who you can reach out to, and he's like a role model for you, and he's done exactly what you're trying to do, go ahead, talk to that person. But these type of people are rare. Sometimes you have to reach out a lot, or like they're like difficult to reach out, so you just don't have no one. And so keep it to yourself, keep it in secrecy, do not seek approval. That's like my main, like, because our society unfortunately is the main, and parents and friends is the first one like who shoots people down, like before anybody else does it.
I mean, they don't do it intentionally,
Yeah,
but that's exactly what's
it's
been
not
done in some
intentional.
situations. Yeah. So not knowing that it's not intentional is really good for you to know that it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's not against you. And what's beautiful about life, I believe, is just fair and rewarding to the hard workers and to the people who keep seeking and just keep trying. And I think we can leave it at this really positive note that you just said. And it was a really interesting podcast. Thanks a lot for sharing your story. I knew that this was going to be a really interesting podcast, so thanks a lot for making it exactly as I imagined it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I hope
We need
this
to
helps
do
people.
Yeah, we will do it again in the
Definitely,
future.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a one shot. من الأول للآخر. تزوار بزاف. I really loved it.
Really?
I really loved it. That was beautiful. خي أسامة. كي داير؟ لاباس عليك؟ Good to see you. كل شيء مزيان. ساعة. That's exactly how I imagine it. 1 hour of content.